I'm Kathy Henrich. I'm the CEO of the Milwaukee Tech Hub Coalition. For those that don't know who we are a nonprofit with the mission to inclusively double tech talent here in the region, both to drive inclusive economic development, but also to create life-changing opportunities for individuals. And one of the 4 pillars that we focus on is building connections in community, and that's what Milwaukee Tech Week is all about. It's a set of programming by the community, for the community. We're very thankful to have a panel today, but there's over 40 events that are going on throughout the course of the week. Including today, there's sessions throughout the day, but then there's a tour this evening, a tech tour going tech company to tech company, which will be kind of
the Higher Education Regional Alliance. And so what this session is going to talk about, we're going to explore some of the best practices surrounding inclusion of those that are historically underrepresented populations in computing-related disciplines on campus, and those regional efforts really to improve tech talent, K-12 outreach and support, bridge programs, students going from high school to college, increasing student awareness of what tech is and going to college and the collegiate experience. Academic and career planning is all a part of that educational process, and what on-campus supports they might have for tech and membership and persistence, and you're keeping students engaged. And then that transition from education to work, and or education and work these days, as we talk about one and the same, or at least happening at the same time. So I'm Phyllis King, Associate Vice Chancellor at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, but today I'm also representing HERA, which is the Higher Education Regional Alliance. And the Higher Education Regional Alliance is 18 higher education institutions in southeastern Wisconsin. They're public, private, 2-year, 4-year, along with a network of partner organizations. It was formed several years ago to coalesce the assets of higher education in this region, and how can we all work together for the common good and to raise the level of education within this community. And we're talking southeastern Wisconsin. So, I mean, believe it or not, there's actually 23 higher education institutions just in southeastern Wisconsin. So HERA captured 18 of those as members, and I serve on the organizing as an operational lead, I'll say, for Goal 2. HERA has 3 goals, overarching goals. One of them is college completion. So we are all working together, higher education is all working together to get more students to and through college and with college degrees, and that's 2- or 4-year degrees. So that's one of the goals. Another goal is curriculum. How do we seamlessly, how do we make education and tech a seamless experience for students? And how do we innovate? So we're talking about everything from micro-credentials, credit, non-credit, boot camps, all the things that Milwaukee Tech Hub is fabulously doing well. We could do more of and do with them. So we just issued a badge this last summer for their boot camp. In AI, which went fabulously, and we're hoping to grow that. So we're really hoping to grow this partnership with the Milwaukee Tech Hub. And then there's Goal 3, which is really engaging employers. How do we get employers involved in all of this and their support in terms of, you know, supporting the academic experience? But we all know that now work and learn, you know, is something that people are increasingly desiring to do, and not only desiring but need to do. So how do we do that? And we know that tech is pervasive in all industries. So capturing that all together is something that HERA does, and working specifically with the Milwaukee Tech Hub. So we're real excited to have these folks here today, these experts, panelists. They're all from higher education, women in tech, and all in this space. And they're going to offer their perspectives, their practices, but at the same time, I really want all of you in the audience here and online, if you can, engage in this to give comments, questions, offer questions, comments, raise your hand anytime. Welcome to have those. Reactions, your reactions to what the panelists might be saying, or to have questions that you might really be inspired by as you're listening to some of their testimonies here today. So let's just keep it sort of a free-flowing sort of experience, and we can feed off of each other's conversations and questions. So with that, I will have the panelists introduce themselves, and I'll start over here with Susan McRoy. Susan, you want to introduce yourself? And then tell us how you got started in tech, and a little bit about your role and your position now in tech.
Okay. So, again, welcome everyone. I am a professor of computer science at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. A professor actually in chair. I'm actually chair of the department. That's still a new one for me. I've been chair for about 2 years, but I have been with my department straight out of graduate school. And so I suppose I have grown up with my department. That's going to be 30 years next year. I got involved in tech. Honestly, I was not a digital native. Okay, I'm old enough when that just wasn't a thing. So I started off as a freshman. When I first started in college, my father was like, "Oh, why don't you consider a computer science major?" Because he read a magazine article somewhere. Okay, and it was one of those things where I was one of these, I have no idea what I want to do when I grow up, kind of high school students. And so I thought, what the heck, let's give it a shot. And I just found the people around me at the time to be very welcoming and engaging, and I found interesting things about the field itself, as well as the people I met, and that really kept me through. So unlike, now of course we can combine computing with so many other things, but I am actually a computer scientist all the way through from when I was 18 years old. Okay? But I didn't grow up that way. I mean, my high school, there was no computer. Or if there was, it was the kind of hobbyist computer that you got the parts from Radio Shack. So I've seen, we've had a lot of cycles in computer science. I think the challenge right now, I'd say, and why I'm here, is that over time you would have thought that maybe it would have gotten more diverse as computing has gotten into more areas, but that is actually not the case. And so that I won't give the whole ball game away, but that's sort of, one of the big challenges as we want to approach everybody at every level. And is that enough to introduce myself? I think so.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I'll turn it over to Allie.
Hi, everyone. I am Allie Jerger. I am the Associate Dean over the IT programs at Waukesha County Technical College. Prior to coming to the college, I worked in IT and industry for 25 years. So I came in my first computer was a VIC-20, moved to a TRS-80, the trash 80s, and then continued to move sort of up in time. So pseudo-digital.
TRS, by the way, is Radio Shack.
Yes, it is Radio Shack.
But
that one wasn't a kit. It actually came fully functional. Yes. Okay. Well, define fully functional. So I sort of grew up as the digital age was coming up. And I went to college for a liberal arts degree and adult education, and I kept going, well, what do I want to do with my life? I had a slight idea, not a total idea. I knew I wanted to do education. I knew I wanted to be in technology. So I was sitting here one day in front of my computer at home going, well, what do I want to do? And it sort of had an epiphany of, how about doing training in computing? And that's how I entered the market. Eventually, I went and worked for consulting. I worked in IT consulting and training for, 20 some odd years, and then I moved to the DOJ in their IT department. And I oversaw every single production change we made. And we had all kinds of good fun stuff with fires in data centers and all kinds of interesting experiences in IT. I was really lucky at the DOJ in that we had 2 deputy directors of IT who were female. And that was a pretty big rarity. And when they retired, all of a sudden, I was back in the minority, and it really changed the entire dynamic. So it's really an interesting experience to have had that kind of representation and support, and then have it disappear within a year, and see what happened, and see how the way I was treated changed dramatically. And it contributed to me making a career change and moving into higher ed. So,
thank you. Interesting to hear from both of you that you really didn't have any idea where you were going in the very beginning. So no structured planning or training or preparation for this area. So, Anik.
Sure. Is this mic on? Can you guys hear me? All right, great. Okay.
All right, so I'm back in business. So my name is Anik Ruiz. I am the WisCamp STEM Inspire Program Manager at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. The WisCamp STEM Inspire program helps students of color that are majoring in STEM fields, and obviously some of those students major in tech or computing fields. Most of them are women, but there's some young men also that want to follow, or other gender identities that want to follow in tech. I stumbled into this sector, and so I can't say that I'm a native to computing or tech at all. Actually, my background is in law. Although I did help chair the e-discovery task force as part of my work in law. But now being in higher ed, I get the privilege of working with folks, young people who are excited to learn about tech. But unfortunately, because of historic discrimination and racism within computing fields, oftentimes feel isolated. They feel alone. They need a sense of community. And so we're here to broaden that community and help students to persist in their STEM major and get that first bachelor's degree. So we have been at UWM since 2011. We are part of a statewide consortium of 18 schools and colleges across the state called WisCamp, including MSOE, Alverno College, Beloit College, and most of the UW schools. Nationally, we are funded through the National Science Foundation, Lewis Stokes Alliance on Minority Participation Grant, which has been in existence for about 30 years. So we've been around for quite a long time, filling a lot of gaps that we see in STEM careers generally for women and people of color. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Annie. Jennifer.
I'm Jennifer Rice, and I'm representing WIT Wisconsin. I'm a board member and past president. And my journey in tech is like some of the others. Like, I had no idea when I went to college, and that sounded scary. And then I ended up with a business degree, but I ended up always working in tech. And I always thought I was a little bit of an imposter syndrome of like, I'm not really in tech. But yet I've spent my entire career and working for technology companies and doing tech work. And so I was feeling some isolation, and I was one of very few women in my company and in my customer meetings that I was in with the consulting company that I work for. And at home, I am the mother of 2 boys, and I have 8 nephews. So even at home, I felt a little isolated. So I was looking for a community to find some community around other women in tech, and I couldn't find it in Milwaukee. I looked, and there wasn't it. So I found this organization, WIT Wisconsin, up in Green Bay, and I said, well, what about Milwaukee? And what about other areas? And that's how I got involved, and we launched the region in 2020, February of 2020, had this great first session. We thought success looked like 50 or 60 women. We had 200. And then the pandemic. So we've had to be really creative and pivot, but the organization is about attracting, growing, and retaining women of all ages in technology-related careers, and that goes from girls through college, through professional, and providing that support and community to feel connected where you may not be feeling that in other places in your life.
Wow, that's wonderful. So, some of the words I'm hearing is I stumbled on this, I didn't know what I was going to do. So I think one of our goals and what we're talking about today is how can we introduce the STEM fields and computer-related disciplines in a much earlier age, in a much structured way, in a more accessible way, and get more attention for that. So, we have 86% of Wisconsin high school students attend school that offer computer science courses. Only 4.6% of those students actually take a foundation course in computer science. So 86% offer 4.6% of students actually take a computer-related course. So that's an interesting statistic right there. And when you think about the current tech talent pipeline, it's just not there. It's not a sufficient number in terms of what we need to feed the workforce today. So neither our current national tech workforce that we have, nor our collegiate pipeline, it really is is sufficient to increase any of the diversity. Women, veterans, individuals of color are just really, really significantly underrepresented. And we know that. So this is the conversation that we're having today is, how do we ensure that we have a robust, a diverse tech talent in the Milwaukee region, and it certainly has benefits. It's going to help to grow our region, and this is what we're trying to do. It helps to increase innovation, sparks a lot of new businesses, quality products, quality services. Everything, as I had mentioned, is very ubiquitous when it comes to computer-related activities now. So what are those strategies that we can focus on? And this is what we're doing here today, is really talking about what are those strategies that we can use to ensure equitable access to computer science and pathways and tech and achievable in terms of our education system in our state. So with that, let's start with the first question. Why? Why do we have this? Why do we have this scenario of underrepresented, minority populations? Just why do we have such disparities here when it comes to tech? And, some people here were saying we're not digital natives, and I think the generations now tend to be, but why do we still have this huge gap? So I'm going to start with Susan and say, why is there this vast underrepresented, population that isn't in tech?
Okay. Well, I have to tell you right up front, transparency, honestly, I don't know that anyone has really totally figured it out. Okay? What we can do at the university level is look at our data. And what our data tells us is if you look at the program as a whole, our undergraduate program in computer science has about 15% women. I'll just look at gender diversity. If you want to look at underrepresented minority groups, the numbers get really, really even, obviously much smaller. Okay? You can look at a program that, now computing isn't all one thing. So computer science, there's various vanilla, varieties of it. There's an undergraduate that meets a lot of accreditation standards that we've been offering for a long time. We recently launched a Bachelor's of Art. There's also a program in the School of Information Studies, which is called Information Science and Technology. Now, I'm going to bring that one up, for example, as is the what do we think is going on. That program was sort of, part of it was launched the idea that, well, maybe the problem was math. And so that other program has no calculus in it whatsoever. And its gender diversity, by the way, is just as bad. So it's not math, folks. People are not migrating to computing or not because of math. We're trying to figure it out at the university level. What we can tell you, though, is that from the data, it looks more like a pipeline problem. That means if you look at the freshmen and you look at the sophomores in computer science at UW-Milwaukee, you could fit them in a Ford Focus. I know, I own one. It's not a good situation. Okay? That is in our traditional BS in computer science. Now, we launched this BA about a year ago, which allows people to be more interdisciplinary in their work. And that program, although it's still very small, is actually showing almost 40% women. You could get them maybe, I don't know, in an expedition. But it's still not the numbers that we need to help the state. Okay? And so we're engaging in a lot of activities, but I think that's a future question. So the real question that we know right now is of the critical program, and we also look at things like whether or not people are successful as they go through the program. And we don't look like we have a disparity there. Some people struggle, some people don't. And men have difficulties, women have difficulties. There's not a big difference there. Okay? But that issue of what happens when you walk into the room and you're the only person of your gender, that is really tough, especially if your family hasn't prepared you for it. And so we're all sort of focusing on that. That is, what is the pipeline? And in Wisconsin, we're in the Midwest. We maybe have our own culture. We have to think about what fits in Midwestern culture. And so I don't know that I have the answer, why we got this way. But we have a situation right now which is sort of self-perpetuating. If you don't see a lot of diversity, then you're not sure if you belong. And that's, I guess, my piece.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Allie?
I'm going to piggyback on some of what you said. We were talking about this before we started, and I think the pipeline is absolutely a thing. Because how do we get more people in the profession if they aren't getting educated in that profession, because now that there are all these degree programs, the opportunity to stumble into IT doesn't really exist anymore like it did when we were all stumbling into IT, right? It's like, oh, well, hey, you seem to be good at computers. Why don't you keep doing that? That people are now looking for degrees or qualifications or certifications in these things. So if we aren't starting that pipeline early, and that's really before they get to higher ed, then there's nothing, it's hard to get them in.
Or openness to try.
Yeah, openness to try and having different programs out there. I also want to pipe in on something you also started to allude to at the end, which is if you don't see yourself, how do you know it's possible, right? I'm a big fan of pop culture. And if you think about pop culture, how often do you see women or other underrepresented areas represented out there on TV shows? I'm a big sci-fi fantasy geek. I go with the stereotype for an IT person. I'm good with that. And most of the female characters are often in support roles in those books. Okay, so for those of you who also are my sci-fi fantasy geeks out here. All right, thank you. I knew there were a couple of you. So same thing, right? If you think about it, how often do you see yourself in those really strong characters? Some of my favorite book series, they are there, but they're the exception. And even in those, like if I think about careers that I see a lot of women and other underrepresented populations in IT, they are nudged into positions that are more socially acceptable for those norms. I was nudged into training because that's a teacher thing. That means it's a female thing. We're nurturing, we're all of these things. Well, guess what? I'm really good at other stuff too. And so I think that's part of there's the societal things and the social norms that we're exposed to every day, and we just absorb them without thinking about it. I think that's a really key piece of how we got to where we are, and it's a hard thing to pivot.
So it sounds a little cultural. I mean, from what I'm hearing, pipeline, I'm hearing sense of belonging or seeing yourself in this field or in this area. How about you, Anik?
I can say that there are a lot of barriers that my students in particular face. Not just, obviously, there's some challenges in terms of how they acclimate into STEM. And so we just did a study on campus with about 300 faculty, staff, and students, all in STEM fields and some in tech fields. And what some of the students confided in us, on a positive note, is some of the students of color actually felt like they could pursue these fields because they had family members or extended family members who had excelled in these trades. Now, some of them, their parents had not gone to college. They didn't have any formal education, but informally they were working in these different fields. And so some of the skills that they needed in order to perform well in school came from that family background. It also came from programming that the students have been involved in at the K through 12 level. So when we're talking about pipeline, it is very important to acknowledge that there are some great pipeline programs, and I see Stacy in the room to talk about, you know, some of those pipeline programs that NM does and others. But those were also really important, and students felt like if they got into one of those programs that it kind of sparked their interest in tech. But another reason I think that's very challenging is finances. And there's some students of color that for their families, if you think about where they come from, so I'm also first generation low income. So I started off at Marquette University in the Upward Bound program when I was in 8th grade. Without Upward Bound, I don't think I would have saw myself in college, let alone going on to graduate school or anything else. And so having those mothers and fathers on campus kind of early on to look out for me, to tell me, hey, this is possible. Here are the fields you can go into. Here are internships if you want to do an internship. So I think all of that prior to the student coming to college is important, but we can't negate resources. And a lot of students just financially are very challenged. Their family is challenged. And especially with the pandemic, a lot of students moved home. And so they have to work 2 and 3 jobs as well as going to school. So thinking about what is going to get me in and out and present the least barriers for me getting in and out and the greatest earning potential sometimes is a consideration for some students.
I've been thinking about this question a lot, and like Susan, I don't think that there's an easy answer. So answering it from my own perspective, and I do think that this, if you can see it, you can believe it, is so important. And one of the tenets that what WIT is, our organization is about, is being able to have those female role models. We have programming starting at the middle school age or the elementary age school, and being able to have those young girls be able to see that what a technologist can look like in so many different ways, and also to understand that a technology career can be so many different things, that it doesn't mean, like we focus on a lot of activities that are, you know, igniting with coding or coding kits and that stuff, but the reality of it is there are so many careers. And so one of the things that we want to make sure that we're educating people about is you don't have to be hands on a keyboard coding to be in technology. It's such a wide range. And I think, you know, what you're talking about of the different programs and the, you know, expanding them to be a wide range of requirements is important, because not everybody wants to be a developer. But I think they have to know what some of these other options are and see diverse populations in those other careers to be able to start thinking what is possible.
Yeah, that's great. So you mentioned education. So I'm going to ask the 3 education folks here, and then I'll ask you, Jennifer, from your organization, what are you doing about it? So now we've heard about the why. So what can we do about it from an education standpoint in terms of our own strategies and practices for inclusion?
Okay, so I will start with a couple different things. Our program has been, the earliest that we started about 6 years ago as a participant in a program called BRAID, which tries to build and recruit more women in computing. And at the same time, we started off a coding club where we bring in middle and high school students, women primarily, but not, we also enjoy bringing in siblings, to help expose people to computing and some of the things they might do at an earlier age. The Girls Who Code Club has actually received a lot of support from the community. Baird has, helped support it. Thank you, folks. And other, individuals, companies, alumni, retired faculty, a lot of people that has been very successful, although it is somewhat limited because we have to bring people to campus and, and so we can only maybe, teach about 60 people a semester. The other program, which we started looking at our data, so that was part of the BRAID thing. We started looking at our data. We discovered we had this pipeline problem, even though we didn't always notice it. We started trying to gather, college-age women on campus and bring them to a big conference where they would see tens of thousands of women in tech in one building, because that is just amazing. I hadn't actually done that myself. I'm referring to the Grace Hopper Celebration of Computing. And if you didn't know of its existence, it's worth checking out, just looking at on the website about what's going on. I went there more as the mentor to a group of about 25 women that we took to the conference, and we've been taking to that conference for about 5 years now. And I was just amazed. You go into the vendors hall, and there's more than 200 companies that are trying to recruit women in for computing, and they represent every sector. And so again, we're trying to expose our undergraduate women to the fact that this is worth staying in. It's a struggle, but it's worth staying in. Okay. This past year, and that's one of the reasons I'm sitting on this panel, we participated in an activity sponsored by the National Center for Women in Technology, so NCWIT. And at that level, this is run out of Colorado, they put us together in a learning circle with 2 other universities, University of Massachusetts Lowell and University of North, Florida to look through our program with a new set of eyes and also look at other people's programs, following something that they call the systemic change model. So there's a lot of attention paid to this problem across the country. The systemic change model has identified some discrete phases that one can focus at within that level itself. So not having to go and recruit middle school students or whatever. You might say, well, maybe the middle schools or other organizations like Girl Scouts should deal with that. But the systemic change model says, look at how you recruit, look at what you're supporting or beef up your support, look at your curriculum, what you're requiring or your program, competencies, look at pedagogy, how you're teaching it, look at your policies. Are you creating barriers that don't need to be there? Okay, so we spent an entire year looking at our data, talking to peers at other institutions, looking at our websites, for example, our marketing. We had marketing people on our team in that business of belonging, and noticing for the first time that we have a lot of photographs which are not very diverse, or they show somebody all by themselves, which is not the typical situation anymore. And so you look at everything with new eyes. And so we've sort of collected a lot of this data, and now we're sort of moving forward to see, piece by piece what we can improve. Now, some of it I've already mentioned. I say we have multiple degree programs. That's sort of the curriculum issue. Pedagogy is often a personal thing, so that's a little tricky. So I think right now at UW-Milwaukee, we're looking at recruitment and support. Okay, support can be many things. It could be scholarships for students. We're trying to, work with the development team to help bring in, support for the students that may struggle with the funding issue, so they're not working all those extra jobs. But also academic support, because you don't always, if you're in a big classroom, you don't always get it the first time. You maybe don't have access, to upperclassmen who would be able to answer your questions, and so we're trying to beef up our tutoring, our supplemental instruction. Various other forms of peer support, both for instruction, like answering questions, and also advising, like what courses, if I have got a lot of choices now, which ones are better for me? So that's working back around the circle. And then recruitment is something that, again, we also need to do. That's things like what the marketing is, and that is important. It's just a little bit harder in terms of what to do other than improve your website. It probably means more going out. But that definitely needs to be done hand in hand with the community, because without knowing, what the community would appreciate, what fits into people's schedules, what the problems are, we're not going to be any more effective than we've been. Okay, but we're looking at it. We've looked at data, and we are learning about what this falls under best practices, by the way. So I don't know, just that we're trying to do better at those.
So, Susan, are those results from the NCWIT study available yet? Or are you still working on those?
The business about collecting data, I mean, that's not something that we turned around and published. A lot of this stuff has actually been published on dashboards until recently, in terms of looking at the diversity of our various programs. For reasons, unfortunately, of resources, our Office of Institutional Research has quit publishing that information as of this year. So it's a little tougher to get at you. But the historical data is there all online in PDF documents, Excel spreadsheets, all that kind of thing. And so you can see the trends. We can actually see that it got, at the upper division, better over the last 5 years. But some of these things that we're just sort of now engaging in won't be as easy to track the progress, at least through traditional methods.
Yeah, it's great to hear from a systemic change. You're really looking at systems change when you're thinking about the continuum and, and what are those data points that you can affect, and policies. Institutional policies is one of them.
Well, policies are things like barriers to getting into the major, and so this idea of having an intended major, we used to have this in our program, and then the real admitted to the major. We looked over at this and we said, well, why are we doing this? It's actually making the pipeline worse and sending the wrong message. So I don't know if you thought we had one. It's now gone. The requirements are going to be those that are set by prerequisites and courses, and there are no, you have to have this and that and whatever it is to declare a major. It's just not a thing. If you can get into the university or admitted to the college, whatever that is, it's fine. And even those things are trying to broaden the base, because we understand that this is our market. Milwaukee aims to be radically welcoming, and we can combine that effectively, we've shown, with also being a top-tier research university. So our content is up to date, as well as trying to create these bridges to wherever people are coming from.
Thank you. It's too bad, but this pandemic, I think, has really kind of exacerbated some of these equity gaps and some of these disparities. And computer science, or in this field, is just one of those. But it's also given us a chance to take a look at and examine ourselves and our institutional policies and our institutional practices. So I think everybody is in the same situation here. So, Allie, how about Waukesha County Technical College?
So our focus is a little bit of a different student body, and a lot of, when I start to think about how I answered some of our first questions, is about pipeline. One of the things that we initiated quite a number of years ago is our dual enrollment academy. So we work with schools in Waukesha County and with the counselors in those programs, and students in their junior or senior years can take classes at Waukesha County Tech and earn a full IS certificate. We call it our Taste of IT, and they walk away with, I think it's like 27 credits in a year. They go to school with us in the morning, and then they go back to their high school in the afternoon, and they're getting dual credit high school and college. What's great is a large number of those students continue on with us when they graduate high school. And I was working with one this morning. He's like, networking. Oh my God, I love networking. Can I substitute this class for the next networking class because I really love networking? He's like, I'm registering next year and that's great, right? We're seeing that. Now, when the program first started, I think we had like 3 dual enrollment students. We had 31 this year. And that was a great problem to have, because all of a sudden I had to run 2 cohorts. Yay. Great problem to have. We've also seen a definite increase in the percentage of underrepresented folks in, I use highly technical words like folks, in our program. We have 15% of females in our program this year. I don't have the numbers on some of the other representations, but it's just really neat to see that population in here. So we definitely are looking at sort of building that pipeline. Once they're here, to your point about support, we need to keep them here. One of the challenges is that we don't have sort of this period of time of undeclared. You come into our programs and you're picking right away. And we're seeing this with all genders and all representations. They're going where they think the money is. They want cybersecurity because that's where they think the money is, and they are not always cut out for that program. They might be better positioned in one of the other programs. But then they get to a certain point and they go, well, I've made it this far. The problem is they don't really like it, and so they're not retaining it, or they get stuck in a course and they quit. So what we're really focusing on is how do we support them and retain them. So we have a new club on campus called ANEW, and it's across all of our programs, not just IT. It's across every single one of our programs, and it's focused on the non-traditional student within that program. So within cosmetology, that's going to be the guys. Okay. In IT, it's the ladies. So we've got a lot of that. In fact, their first lunch is today, right now. I'm missing it, but I'm glad to be here with y'all. So we've got ANEW. We also have what are called navigators, and we have a navigator who's dedicated to women in our IT program. So if they're struggling with anything, finding a tutor, just dealing with life and the transition and trying to balance the world outside of school with their homework assignments, they can meet with their navigator. And the navigator will come over to our building, sit down with them, meet them anywhere on campus that they feel comfortable. They'll then work with me or my instructional team to find ways to strategize to help those students be successful. Because for some of them, their first time in. They may be the first of their generation to go to school. We attract a lot of that. We have a fairly high population of students with disabilities who need accommodations, And so we're dealing with those pieces as well, and the navigators really help our students navigate those challenges. So we've got that. We also work with NC WIT with a lot of their different programs. We have one of my faculty members who helps with scholarship review of those pieces. In fact, 2 of our students are NC WIT scholarship recipients. And so we have some amazing people. We're recognizing a couple of outstanding students who are graduating this year, and they're female. It's just really about that support as well as getting them into the pipeline. And I'm excited to be a standard representation of what it means to be a successful woman in IT for our students every single day. Walking down the halls, talking to them, being my own weird, quirky self, and saying you can be yourself and be successful. You don't have to conform to a specific norm in order to be successful out there. But that's the problem. We have to have people, I keep coming back to that, they have to see themselves. And so, you know, I'm your weird colored haired, tattooed, you know, person who's been extremely successful in IT. And so that's part of what we're also doing, is representing.
Thank you. We need more of you. I want to stick with this for a second here now that we have a 2-year and a 4-year campus here, talking about curriculum. And since we're talking about education pipeline, I'm deviating a little bit from the questions, but is curriculum. So if somebody goes to cyber or wants to, you know, goes to Waukesha County Technical College, and can they go to UWM, have all their credits be applied? You know, what does that pipeline that look like?
There are articulation agreements that
Okay.
we have, especially with UWM. In fact, we have a new one with UWM because we are very excited. We now have a general liberal arts associate degree available at the college. And what's nice about that is it allows them to almost do that taste of IT that you couldn't normally get, because their electives, they can pick from any program. So then they can pick and choose some of those. I mean, there's the prereqs and all of those kinds of things. But we've worked really hard with UWM to come up with transfer. We actually call it internally our liberal arts transfer program, because we're looking to make sure that those classes are going to transfer. It varies university to university and college to college as to how many of our credits they'll take. Just as when we have people coming and transferring into us, we look at syllabus and we look at content, we look at their grades to determine what will actually transfer in.
So, Susan and Allie, what about non-traditional students? What about students that have been working in IT but they want advancement and they want to go to school? Are you taking life credits? I'll
Yep.
say, you know, credit for prior learning,
Yep.
I'll call it, or whatever. Are you bringing those in and saying, yeah, you've already done this, you don't need to take these courses?
We do, and I'll let Susan speak to her program.
There is a flex program statewide. I don't know that there is one specific to Milwaukee. Okay?
A what program?
The flex program?
Flux.
Flex,
Oh, Flex.
F-L-E-X.
Yes.
That's a statewide thing that tries to map work experience onto credits, but it's not managed at our level. Okay? We do see more non-traditionals probably in our graduate programs. And so one of the things that we launched, again, I don't know, within the last 5 years, I don't remember exactly, is a professional master's in computer science, which doesn't necessarily presume that you have had an undergraduate degree in computer science. So it starts off with allowing some of these more introductory courses, and we're offering them in a flexible schedule, so sometimes you can do it online or in person or whatever. And the idea is that it allows people who, again, had perhaps not a computer science undergraduate degree or had one a long time ago, and so they maybe need to sort of reacquaint themselves with some of the curriculum, to start at basically zero. And within that 30 credits of a master's, you know, get their degree. And that's been working really well. I mean, unfortunately, almost frighteningly well. Because I think we've like tripled in size in the last couple of years, and so we're you know, looking at that. But it is, by being bigger, allowing people to come from, you know, other kinds of paths, it is appearing to be more diverse than, you know, what we were seeing at the undergraduate level. So we see more women, we see more people from underrepresented minorities, perhaps. But So that's one thing, is maybe we can't pack it all into the undergraduate degree. Can I say also the undergraduate degree, that when I mentioned our Bachelor of Arts, we have a little weird feature in that one, and you have to have either a second major, because we reduced the number of credits compared to our BS. You have to have either a second major or 2 minors. And one of the ways we let people fill that is with a 2-year degree from, let's say, from Waukesha, excuse me. And so we've had that. In fact, at UW-Milwaukee in our computer science, we get as many people transferring in at junior year as we get as incoming freshmen. So our profile is a little bit different, perhaps, than you might expect.
Yeah, and we have a whole set of, we call them our PLAs, and for most of our classes we have established PLAs where they can come in and they go through an assessment. We'll take some industry standard certifications, so if you happen to have, you know, your CNA or, you know, any of your Cisco or Microsoft certifications, and we will map some of those to specific classes. So we do definitely have those prior learning components. We're even doing them for some of our internships so that students don't have to immediately go, oh, look, I already have a job doing this and I've been doing it for however long. You know, we're looking at evaluating, you know, that so that we're taking away some of those barriers to completing the degree as well. But quite a number of our classes we do have that for.
One more question about curriculum, and then I'm going to get to organizations and programs here. But so online, the pandemic just made us pivot to these online programs. So are they successful with computer science degrees or courses? Or I know it's a big question, but and then do you see differences in terms of the audiences and you know, between underrepresented minority participation and or success, you know, between the different student populations, given the online factor or variable? So how does that work?
You want me to start? Okay, so I would say that from UW-Milwaukee's perspective, it does not work when you're just starting out, at least in computer science, probably across many majors. When people are just starting out, it's not just about accumulating facts. It's about learning to be a university student, getting along with a bunch of strangers. A lot of growing goes on in those first couple of years of being at a university. And we honestly, you know, when we had to be online, you know, we did what we could to keep people safe. But the first things to go back to being in person are our introductory courses, because those students benefit the most. We still are maintaining some courses online, but where those are happening are for our seniors, because our seniors, with all that nice flexibility, they went off and got jobs. Okay, there's a lot of demand for them, and so in order to help them, you know, finish their degrees without having to give up, you know, their job or their salary, or you know, try and negotiate a part-time situation if they don't feel quite as comfortable to make those demands, a lot of our senior level requirements, so for our BS, there's a capstone requirement that we're continuing to do online because we're working with people. And so it's a balance. I'd love to bring everybody back, but we're also realistic about, you know, the complexity of people's lives now, and I think it's going to take a while to kind of unwind that.
Yeah, I want to make a distinction in sort of in my mind when I think about online, that would be an asynchronous 100% online. The rest of our classes, we call them our hybrids. So just from a language perspective, we only offer one class now as 100% async online, because we were finding that it just wasn't working. That connection, I mean, we lost a lot of social connectedness with the pandemic, and then we're not preparing students for the real world, because, you know, the days of IT where we would sit in a cube and never talk to anyone, those are days of the past. We all have to have those social connection skills. We have started to see, when we look at the numbers, that the Zoom-only classes are classes where we are not seeing as well success rates. We require our students to be on camera. That's not always as feasible because they don't have the bandwidth or they don't have a camera. But how do we know they're attending if they aren't there and they aren't necessarily creating a space to learn? So they're on camera and we see the kids going by, we see the parents going by, someone's interrupting. It's hard to work from home. It's hard to learn and focus from home. So I'm scheduling for fall 2023 right now. There are papers all over my desk as I try to do this. And we're looking at pulling as much back on campus as is feasible while still meeting students where they need to learn. So most of our hybrid or our Zoom options will be in the evenings to help accommodate those students who are working and they can't work until 5, get home, eat dinner, and get to our campus by 6. It's just not feasible. But even for a lot of those, we're running them simultaneously, where we have students in our classrooms and we have students on Zoom. Our classrooms are all with microphones hanging down from the ceiling, cameras in corners of the room, at least 2 monitors for the instructor station so they can have their Zoom people on one and content on the other. We've got whiteboard technology where they write on it and it pops up on the screen so all the folks online can see it. So we've really moved to that. But, you know, there's classes that can't work with both. If we've got a lot of group work, we need them all to be here or all 100% on Zoom. So we've really had to, we're reevaluating. And for fall 2023, a lot of it's going to be back on campus, which is great. It's nice to see students on campus.
Yeah, it is a challenge, and with all the things that you just mentioned. So, Anik, I'll turn it over to you in terms of education and practices and WisCamp, and what are the things that you're doing that you're finding most effective?
I'll tell you honestly, so the way our program works, students that are involved in our program first off get a faculty mentor. So what we have seen is students who are paired with a mentor very early on actually achieve more success because they have someone in that particular department who is invested in that success, who knows how they're doing in their classes, who they can meet with once a month, and they meet with their mentor once a month. This year, because we also saw attrition with the pandemic, I actually put in place 2 other things that students need to do. And this was in conjunction with our faculty. So some of the faculty were saying, hey, what I'm seeing is I have these students who are in all these different organizations or activities, or they're doing research on campus, but I don't know what other things that they're doing, and therefore I don't know how to properly advise them or help them. And so now students, when they meet with their faculty mentor in September, they had to turn in a student activity log that logs in all the activities and leadership things they're doing on campus, all of their research activities and work activities and commitments. It was not just for the faculty mentor to see it, but sometimes students, especially, and I'm going to be honest, when you're a student of color, sometimes you don't find your community in that department. Sometimes you have to look outside of your major to find your community. On our campus, UW-Milwaukee is privileged to have several offices, identity offices on campus. Our Roberto Hernandez Center, our Black Student Cultural Center. We also have our Southeast Asian Student Center, and we have our American Indian Student Center. And so those centers are there along with others like Women's Resource Center to provide wraparound services for those students. So oftentimes they're going outside of the department, they're joining clubs, they're finding community, which is really great, on top of working in other things, but sometimes they haven't taken inventory of what all they have going on, right? And so they're running from pillar to post to try to do these things, and pretty soon, because they love doing it, it consumes their time, but then school and classes come on the back burner. So it's also for them to evaluate their time commitments, what they're a leader or part of, and so they can take inventory and also create a way to establish priorities and also time management. And then in October, students will actually submit to their faculty mentor an academic progress report. They have to go to each of their instructors, and they have to write initially how they feel they're doing in the courses. So one of our faculty mentors actually came up with this to say, hey, before you ask the instructor for feedback, ask the student to reflect on how they feel they're doing in the class, if they feel like they're struggling. And all of the classes then, all of that reporting will go to that faculty mentor who can talk to the student and talk through some of those issues, not to shame the student. We took out the part about them reporting about grades. and instead ask the instructor to talk about just generally how the student is doing in the class. So those are two things. I'll talk briefly. We also have peer mentors. So each student gets a peer mentor in their STEM major, okay? Vitally, vitally important that students have peers surrounding them that are in their major, have taken the classes that they've taken, because they will disclose to those peers what they won't disclose to us. And so those peers oftentimes act as kind of like that resource and that kind of family for the students. We also have peer tutors. So I have 3 peer tutors in the classes that I see students struggling the most in, which is calculus, organic chemistry, and physics. Now these tutors can tutor in other academic subjects and obviously in computer science and other courses, but it's meant to surround the student with that academic help that Susan was talking about, to say, look, it's fun and it's fine that you're involved in clubs, that you're doing things. I did that when I was in school, but we got to make sure we get this academics right. We need to get you in, but I don't want to see you here for several more years. I want you to get in and get out to do what you want to do. And so those peer tutors also help, and all of this is funded through our grant. So we're able to provide funding for these tutors and funding for the mentors. We also provide funding for students to attend conferences. So between this month and next month, that's why I'm tired, I have about probably now 10 or 11 students that are traveling to conferences. During the pandemic, of course, everything was suspended, right? So we had all of this grant funding we couldn't spend because students weren't traveling to conferences, and most virtual conferences were free or low cost. Well, now I have students traveling to Hawaii next month. I have students traveling to Denver, Colorado. I have a group of students, I have 7 or 8 traveling to the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers National Convention in Charlotte, North Carolina. We have students, and so traveling to these conferences, going back to what the other panelists are talking about, not only do you see folks that look like you, I'm talking about the SHIP conference, SACNAS, other conferences for students of color, for women. Grace Hopper is one. Society of Women Engineers. Getting students funded to go to these conferences often opens up opportunities, internship opportunities, and others where they don't have to compete with the crowd, right? Funding to attend conferences, funding for research. So right now I have 2 student researchers in our program, and they're funded to do that, and we've always had researchers as a part of our program. We know that students that get involved early in research oftentimes do better academically, and so we have research mentors as a part of our program, but it is that holistic piece within the university, within the program. But it was also my realization, because I'm not a native to the tech sphere, and understanding that I had to get out of my office and my university to go out into the community to understand what the needs of the students are. If we stay in our little squares and things of life, and we don't actually go out to the communities in which these students come from and actually help them to get connected to those resources, it's very difficult for them once they leave us, right? They have this very supportive community, and they leave us and they go to these jobs and they're like, I hate it. And I've had students go to jobs in tech and say, maybe I should come back for my master's, because either I'm seeing that there's a ceiling, or I just don't feel comfortable in this setting. Nobody prepared me to be the only one or to face discriminatory or racist practices, right? And so how do we get our students prepared is that we provide that wraparound within the community to resources that can help them once they become a professional.
That's an excellent point about the community, and working in the community and working with employers for that engagement as well. Excellent point. Jennifer, Women in Tech. What's Women in Tech doing to help with the situation?
So we are a all-volunteer organization, nonprofit, and we focus our programming in 3 pillars: WIT for girls, WIT on campus, and WIT for work. So really trying to provide programming throughout the journey. So trying to provide programming that can spark the interest at a young age for what is possible. That might be coding activities. We've helped Girl Scouts get tech badges. We are providing some video interviews. That's a project we're doing right now that teachers can be able to have access to interviews of a woman in tech, like talking about different careers. In our college area, we have a professional connections program. So I've got our 2 chairs in this area, Deanna and Allison, and they are managing part of, across the state, a professional connections program where we have all these women tech professionals that want to provide mentorship to college-age students. So they are matching those students with our volunteers to be able to provide and ask questions, work on a project. Allison was telling me a lot of the requests is around professional development, interviewing, and resume building, and being able to get some real input from people that are working in the field. And then our Women WIT at Work is providing additional professional development opportunities for women in tech, because not only do we want to get women and young girls to get in that, but we want them to stay. It's a high percentage of women who do leave, like higher than other industries. And so part of that is finding and forming these people, your sisterhood. We talk a lot about our sisterhood, your community, to be able to support that. So we do both in-person and virtual programming around that. We have, when the pandemic happened, we had to pivot from what was traditionally in-person breakfast series on a Friday morning to virtual. And we just had a virtual event last week, and there was over 500 people that registered for this event. So we're consistently getting people to come and see this content. We try to do it a mixture of tech, some technical focus, and professional development. And then we're now going back to in-person events, but realizing, well, most people aren't going into the office on Fridays, so that's probably not a good day to have an in-person event. So figuring out what does that look like for in-person events going forward, what's the right time, what's the right format, options. So we're providing, last month we did one in Brookfield. We had 4 top women professionals, the CISO for Kohl's department store and others, that were there talking about their career journey. And we had 80 women that were in that room listening to what it was like. And we opened those up to college students, even high school. So a high schooler came up to me afterwards and said, this is really interesting. And we were talking about our professional connections program. And she's like, can I apply? Sure, absolutely. And I connected her with Allison, and Allison actually had somebody who was a volunteer who was just out of college that wanted to be part of the program, and we thought this is a perfect match to be able to make those connections and be able to develop. So we're a support organization, not only supporting what you all are doing, but supporting for women who are in the tech community that maybe are, in your day job. Like in my day job, I work for a cybersecurity company. I support a team of, there's 12 of us on the team. I am the only woman on that team. It's great, but I come to my WIT event and it's like, yes, I'm here with my people. And I love it. And I've made connections, and it's made me stay very connected and interested in staying in the tech field. And I think longer than I would have if I hadn't had that community.
That's excellent. So you're talking about partnerships and partnerships with a lot of different entities or organizations. And, from the education standpoint, I'll ask all 3 of the educators here to kind of weigh in on, partnerships. So you can educate, and then we have the co-curricular, but, there's a community, there's employers, and all of that out there. What do you see as successful partnerships with industry or with organizations or with community and employers? And what do you see as successful, and then what do you see as the challenges?
Oh, this is tough. I do think that internships are very, very, very valuable. and a variety of types of internships for people in tech, especially ones that might come at the early stages where maybe people don't have a lot of skills but are still, seeking to figure out what this is going to be. One of the messages about curriculum or pedagogy, I suppose it's more related to that came out of our NC WIT experience was they summarized it as making it matter. That what you're doing is not just picking up a skill or memorizing facts or doing whatever it is, but that, computing is just like a lot of other things, a tool for solving a larger problem. And so internships that are either with, public service organizations or every company has some kind of a social role. So having people come in and be exposed to what is really happening and being able to talk to people about how that work impacts the broader community or the economy or other kinds of things, I think is really valuable. And so those partnerships for interns or coming in as speakers, having people come in and talk about technology and how it's being used in their workplaces or in their social organization or whatever would be valuable. More of that communication I think the students need to see or hear along the way, and so that's my message is I think it's really, really important, and they say that the data seems to show that the folks who've had those internships, and not every community has enough of those kinds of jobs, but those who have had them, again, feel more like persisting in computer science.
Well, we're, as a community college, very connected into our community. We have extremely active advisory boards for every single one of our programs. So one of my primary charters when I came on board at the college was to rebuild and sort of reconnect those advisory boards. So we certainly have our internship programs, but really looking for those advisory boards to not just come in twice a year and advise us on a curriculum change, but to actually have them connect us with people in their organizations where we can do information interviews. So people actually know, instead of just, an IT career fair is great. We've got one coming up in November. But that's often the hiring managers. The hiring manager doesn't always know what the people doing the job every single day, what does that day in the life look like? So looking to try to get those connections built, have those guest speaker opportunities, and also connect into the alumni. We don't have much of an alumni program connection at all, and that's also one of my main things that we're looking to do in the spring is create an alumni event that also includes current students. So we're going to do it in a TED Talk format, which we're like ridiculously excited about, and have 10-minute topics that will be done by alumni, by faculty, and it's going to be the IT program falls under our School of Business. We have the best group because it includes culinary, so we get all the really good food. So we'll have culinary as well as the business side of our school and IT participating in this event. So really making those community connections. Again, we do a lot with NC WIT. I used to use ridiculously excited a lot, but I'm really excited to be now connected into the local WIT and want to try to build that relationship on campus. And so I'll be talking to you guys after this session and seeing what we can really do to help support that. But you brought up that point about not having those nice, wonderful wrappers when they leave school. So organizations like WIT and other professional organizations where we can have those things. I have a call every week with someone I used to work with, 8 o'clock every night. Or every Monday we have a call and we just kind of go, all right, what's it been like this week? And she's a new manager, she's an IT project manager, and she's in a tough environment. So we just talk through those situations. So having those people and helping to make those connections for our students so that they are successful and want to stay in those positions because it's hard out there.
Do you feel like employers get it? Like, do they appreciate the diversity factor or understand it or know how to handle it?
They don't know how to handle it.
Okay.
They certainly have, in my opinion, more recognition of it than they did, say, 4 or 5 years ago. I think there's been a lot that has come in terms of awareness, willingness to have conversations, and have those conversations not be a blaming conversation has helped a lot. I know I've had some transformative conversations with people over the last handful of years that have changed my perspective on things and helped me see that what I was going through wasn't okay and wasn't normal, which allows me to better support the students and the population that I work with every day. So I don't think they know how to deal with it yet. I think it's going to be an ongoing journey, but I think they're at least recognizing it and understanding that the conversation has to happen, even if it's not comfortable.
Yeah, and I just want to join it. We are funded primarily by sponsorship. So we have over 20, I think closer to 30 corporate sponsors that are funding our programming. And so, why are they doing that? Because they realize that they need to not only, we're helping to support the talent pool, but we're also helping to keep the diversity in the tech field. And so I think that we're continuing to see that and understanding that people are supporting because the mission is important. It's a lot easier for us to have that sponsorship conversation now than maybe it was 5 years ago, because they're realizing it. And we're here at Baird today. Baird is one of our sponsors, and part of it is we had a woman, Tracy Miller, who works for Baird, and she was one of the people that I first connected, and we said, like, why not in Milwaukee, and was behind it, and Baird was behind her too in terms of getting this group off the ground and supporting it. And we tap into those companies too to be speakers, to make connections there. And so I still don't know that they know what the whole answer, like we keep saying that, but definitely the importance of it.
Anik, how about you? What's your wish list?
Oh my God. Do we have time? Because, I just keep it real. I'm just always myself wherever I go. So I'll tell you that I can't do what I do without partnerships, because I have one person that works with me 1 day a week remotely, and she's retired. What she does 1 day a week, though, probably most folks could not do in an entire week. And so, and she's on vacation now, so I love her if she's watching this from a boat somewhere. But because of that, I deeply appreciate our partners. I would say my strongest partner is our students. The partnership with the student comes first. And you have to walk alongside of them in their journey in tech, because it is a journey. And I have had some students to start off in school and then figure out they needed to leave for various reasons, and then decide that they want to come back. And I don't let them go. I check on them. Hey, how are you doing? I ask them about their families. And so I think we have to learn how to walk with people. And sometimes that's more hand-holding, sometimes it's less. But I think my partnership with the students and those wraparound services are helpful. So I mentioned a lot of the partnerships that go on within our program. I also mentioned about our multicultural centers and other supportive resource centers, including our advisors and others on campus that help multicultural students. They're invaluable. When I first started at UWM, I went to my first multicultural network meeting, and I automatically knew, I said, one of the issues with this program is that we're not aligned with the campus as a whole. We operate in silos within our companies, within our individual realms, and we don't step out to meet people and connect with people in the work. And so connecting with them, I think I saw our application pool shoot up from maybe 25, 30 students a year to 80 in 1 year. And last year was no exception. We had a lot of students to apply, but that's because they were pushing that information. They were actually legitimizing our program. Because students will ask, well, I've never heard of WisCamp, but so-and-so in the RHC told me about it, and so-and-so student said that it was helpful. And so those partnerships help create that community where they are talking to the students about the benefits of our program. When our students encounter challenges, I go to them and say, hey, can you look up for me and navigate and tell me what's going on with this student? You know, I haven't seen this student at this program. And they talk to me, oh, yeah, I just saw them yesterday. They're having this challenge, so we partner together internally. Externally, I have a lot of partnerships, some with the folks in this room. So I'm looking at Damien, who came to talk to our students from Baird. I think that was last year, a year before, to talk to our students. And I see some of my other friends in the room as well who have spoken to my students. I rely on my community of color to help sustain my students, because some of my students, they apply for that first, second, and third job, and they don't get in. And I had one young man, black young man, very talented, was a transfer student from MATC, came to UWM, did very well in IT, kept applying for jobs, and could not get a job. So I was real. I asked him, I said, hey, is there something that you're not telling me? Like, you got some type of criminal background? Like, just talk to me. Like, and he was like, no, Anik, you know, I don't have this, I said, okay. So what did I do? I could pick up the phone. I talked to his faculty mentor. Hey, we need to figure something out. We need to do something. I picked up the phone again. I called Tariq Moody from 88.9 Radio. Hey, Tariq, do you know about jobs, you know, for my student? Can you talk to him? And he actually had a Zoom call with me, his faculty mentor, him, you know, to talk about opportunities for black men in tech. You know, I reached out to several others, and finally he got a job. He has a job right now in IT. But it took a lot. And it got him very discouraged. You know, what's wrong with me? You know, why won't they accept me at these major corporations? And so I don't want to say that corporations don't get it, because corporations are made up of people, and corporations are not, they're not one thing, right? Within corporations, you have all kinds of folks who work there with different ideologies, points of view. And so I don't think they're homogeneous. I think that what you have to do is find the right people within those different organizations who have an investment in young people, and cultivate those relationships and get out of your comfort zone. WIT is going to be at our event next week, Somos Tech, October 12th. Hopefully you guys can come out. Celebrating Latinos in Tech in Wisconsin is for all students in Wisconsin. All I did was send an email to her, and she said, she connected me with Diana and, I'm sorry, Allison. And they're like, we're there. You know, what do we need to do? You know, UMOS is there. Other folks are there. And so extending out to other professional organizations of color, and then making the connection with the student, Milky Way Tech Hub, MKE Tech Hub, all of these different resources, the students need to get connected to them, and I bring them with me to those events. And so I think that's also very positive. Them having a sponsor, not just saying, hey, go to this event. And they're just like, I don't know anybody, I really don't want to go. No, you come with me, and we're going to go, and I'm going to introduce you to these people. It helps students to build that confidence.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Anik. I know we have about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to open it up now to the audience here. And any questions, comments? Yes.
So I do have a question. First of all, this is awesome. I'm learning a lot. I'm running out of paper. First of all, on this side, oh, sorry, thank you. On this side with Susan and Allie, it's really great to see, it's refreshing to know how schools are evolving and providing more programs. I would say when I started in tech, I'm not going to say how many years ago, but you know, it was like I can't say that all these programs were available. And if they were, I didn't know anything about them. And just going back to Anik, because my question is for you, and you hit the nail on the head. Like, I love when you said about, like, if you want to know about the students, if you want to understand more what better ways to, what services you can provide, right? What I say is know the customer, right? Do you know who the customer is? What are they saying that they want? So what are the students saying that they want? And I feel like that is like, that's step one. That's where you start when you want to know how to better evolve your services or what ideas to bring. And so thanks for sharing that experience and kind of those examples about how you're helping to cultivate the culture or enable the culture, be more inclusive, right? What other examples do you have? Like, how are you promoting this? I know that you go like, in person as much as you can, but we do have those that are virtual, right? And so what are some promotional things that you do, advertisements, like how do you bring that inclusiveness or get the word out to those busy individuals?
So there's a few things that I've had to do, and probably all of us have had to do, especially during the pandemic. It hit us particularly hard. And obviously that didn't just affect our students, that affected faculty, that affected staff. We've had a lot of attrition at the university level. We've had a lot of folks to retire. And so there are folks who are wearing 2 and 3 hats, right? So we talk about being busy. Our students are busy. We're busy. Faculty are busy, right? Everybody has all of these things going on. And yet there are priorities that we feel like if the student doesn't get these things early, then their level of persistence can wane over time. And so in the virtual space, one of the programs we had, it was actually part of Wisconsin Tech Month last year, was a program called Using Data Wisely to Help Communities of Color What You Need to Know, right? So we know how our data sometimes is appropriated in communities of color, and we're tested on, and there's data that's being extracted, but how is that data then being shared in terms of those results, in terms of measurable outcomes, in terms of health disparities or other disparities back to those communities? And to what extent do they really understand how their data is being used, right? To make money. People profit off of it, right? And so we had that conversation with an indigenous bioethicist and with some others, Nadia Johnson and others in the community to talk about that. We had like over 100 attendees at this virtual event. And so in just thinking about, there are people who are hungry for that information. We had students to come, stay after, ask questions. Why? Because they're like, first off, I have women who look like me, who are on this panel talking about issues that are important to me. 9 times out of 10, the students that are in my program are in there because they want to tackle an issue that they've seen that is prevalent in their community. And so sometimes what we don't do is school oftentimes for students of color, for other groups of students, is a means to an end. It's not an end in and of itself, okay? And so connecting the pedagogy we talked about and what they're learning to actual real world solutions and outcomes, and getting them to focus on and work on how does what I'm learning in the classroom translate to how I want to solve this real world problem that my mom experienced when she had cancer, or my family experienced. I had one student, he was in the master's program. He emailed me one morning and said, Anik, I have to drop out of school. He was from the 53206 zip code. He didn't have internet. He's a master's student in IT with no internet. So he would come to school at night. Obviously, it wasn't safe for him to take the bus and go back home because I knew where he lived. But see, I came from that same community. So the advocacy piece is very important, whether you're virtual or in person. Students want to see that you care about what they care about. And that takes getting to know them And you can do that virtually or in person, but you have to be authentic. You have to have heart, and you have to show them that you care. And when they fail is when they need the most support, not when we need to draw back and say, oh, well, you're not cut out for this. You're not cut out for this because you have a child and now you can't make it to class. No, how do we work with you to make sure that you get what you need in whatever modality or way that works best for you? And to me, that is really the message that we need to send. However we send that, I think we need to get that out there.
Excellent, excellent. Time for one more question. Yeah, Mark.
Sorry, I'll do the right thing. Stacy and I talk about this a lot of tracking and like our K-12 impact is difficult to follow all the way through into higher ed, because you can, with tracking minors and collecting the data and all that. So I'm really wondering, how can we be innovative about the push into K-12 and the gap that is experienced with CS education in K-12 and the lack of CS teachers, and how can we? So I'm not expecting you to have an answer, but can we problem solve together to get better at matching the Girls Who Code Club participants, getting them to apply to the undergraduate majors, the kids in the College for Kids and Teens program, following them through their application process, getting them matched to an undergraduate mentor like Anika's doing, and really like following some of these students from elementary school all the way into higher ed and then into their professional careers. I think that's a gap that we haven't solved yet, and I like to get better at it.
I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer either, because you have this large gap, and it's hard to do longevity studies like that, right? And because especially when you're dealing with minors and getting that data sanitized, yet still getting that information to a way that we can look at it. So I don't have an answer, but I agree. It would be great to be able to do that, right? To be able to have those successes and see what were the factors if we look back. What were the factors that made it successful? Was it because we caught them when they were in Girl Scouts or Brownies? Was it because we caught them at high school? Was it because we made sure that when we went into these places to talk about it, that we had really good representation of different ethnicities and genders, and but we don't have the data. And then how long does it take to get it?
I want to speak to that, though, because I would really, really be sad if we looked at the problem and said, well, it's too hard to collect data, so we're not going to try. And so what I really, really like to encourage is for people, because this is what I'm doing, to just trust that if they, do what they think is good, spread the message that people are going to be welcome. There may be challenges, but everyone has challenges, and there will be people to help you, that it's worth giving it a shot. We don't track Girls Who Code all that carefully. Our sense is actually that a lot of them do go on to university, but they just may not go to our university, because a lot of them get scholarships and they may go somewhere else. So even if we were doing a perfect job, we're not necessarily going to be able to track them. But we still think it's worthwhile, and in fact, we'd like to be able to do more. Other campuses in Wisconsin, they're taking a slightly different approach where they're trying to build capacity by training some of the college students to help set up coding clubs like Girls Who Code in the high school itself. Okay, because if you're limited to how many people you can bring to your campus, which is, in one little corner of the state, it's going to be small. But if every middle school in the state could have some experience once a week, in their own, so they don't have to travel, they don't have to, make arrangements for whatever to happen. If everyone could have some informal exposure to computing that was positive, that would be helpful. It would be helpful even if you don't go on to a computing major, It's just that I think it's a type of literacy now that is so pervasive. And if not enough people understand it well enough to notice, you know, when bad things are happening. I think that's one of the reasons that companies are more worried about diversity, is that they keep making awful mistakes because there wasn't somebody in the room that pointed out something that would have been totally obvious, you know. One of my own classes, I do, you know, a class on user interfaces, and somebody had come up with a thing where it used the camera on the computer to tell whether you were leaning towards the computer or not. Well, you know what? It didn't work at all for me, and why not? Because I have longer hair. It worked just fine for the guys with the really short haircuts, okay? Totally not for anyone who might have shoulder-length hair. Okay, we're finding now that, you know, smartwatches and things like that, the little lasers they have don't work very well on people whose skin is you know, not the, you know, most common color. It's like in pulse oximeters and all these kinds of devices. And wouldn't that have been discovered long ago if, you know, the teams that work on these things, the engineers, the computer scientists, whatever, were more representative of the society that they serve.
I will just say,
that's my little hobby horse. I'll get off.
Thank you. And I will just say that we're starting to use technology to do this. And so part of it is we being M-Cube. I don't know if you've heard of M-Cube. So MPS, MATC, and UWM have gotten together to transform the city of Milwaukee through education. And it's a public education ecosystem. And so what they're doing is they're taking one common platform. What they're calling is Navigate. I don't know if you've heard about it, but it's a student success platform, a program that collects information and that actually is used by the student coming out of MPS to and through MATC and or to UWM. But they're actually tagged and they're followed, and the data is collected all along the way. So if they start in high school and they claim that they want to go into tech, we can actually put a tag on that student and find out where they go and where they land and what degree they've gotten, and even where they've gotten employed. So, and what internships they've had along the way. So that is now starting to be collected through these, I'll say, intelligence programs, and MATC has just adopted it this last spring, and UWM has had it for a while. But it's not everybody. It's just a start. But it is a start of a common technology platform that tracks students through through from ACP all the way to graduation. So I'm sorry to say we're out of time, because this is a great conversation to have. So I do want to say thank you to everyone in this room and everyone online for participating and attending this program. We have compiled a list of resources that we'll send out to everyone that did register. And then we also have the Milwaukee Tech Hub's Coalition's website. I think they'll be posting it on there too, but we'll give you a list of more resources for that. So this is being recorded today, so I believe that will also be available in the future too on their website. So again, thank you all very much for coming.